There are places in this world that never stop changing, like London, built on layers of history yet constantly evolving, or Dubai, where new skyscrapers seem to rise overnight. And then there are places in our world where time stands still. Whether frozen in time by natural disaster or simply left behind because no one cared to stay, these 15 eerie locations stand virtually undisturbed, each with a story as haunting as the ruins themselves. Let's start off this list with number 15, Pripyat, Ukraine. It was like a modern Pompeii, except instead of lava, it was invisible radiation that sealed its fate. On April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, spewing out 5% of its radioactive core. The fallout was immediate and unforgiving. According to the World Nuclear Association, 28 people lost their lives in the initial aftermath due to acute radiation sickness. But the real tragedy unfolded in the days that followed. 45,000 residents of Pripyat were told to evacuate, assured they'd be back in a few days. They never returned. Eventually, over 220,000 people had to abandon the entire exclusion zone, leaving behind a city frozen in time. Now, Pripyat stands as an eerie relic of a vanished world. Shattered windows frame rooms filled with forgotten furniture. School books still lie open on desks, and a rusting Ferris wheel, once destined for joy, looms over an amusement park that never got to see its grand opening. Meanwhile, nature has moved in like an unbothered landlord. Wolves, moose, and wild boar roam the streets, proving once again that when humans mess up, the wild takes over without a second thought. Number 14, Kolmanskop, Namibia. Kolmanskop had everything: wealth, luxury, and even a ballroom in the middle of the desert. It was the kind of place where people drank champagne after picking diamonds straight from the sand. Basically, it was like a city of diamonds. But when the diamonds dried up, so did the town's luck. Founded by German miners in the early 1900s, Kolmanskop was built with European ambition but zero long-term planning. Water had to be hauled in from 75 miles away, and once richer diamond fields were discovered elsewhere, the residents left faster than you could say market collapse. By 1956, the desert had taken over. Now, its grand houses are filled with shifting dunes, and faded wallpaper peeks through layers of sand. The wind whistles through empty halls, and doors creak without a hand to push them. Kolmanskop isn't just abandoned. It's being swallowed whole, proof that nature doesn't need an eviction notice to move in. Number 13, Sanji UFO Houses, Taiwan. If the Jetsons had a failed real estate project, it would have been the Sanji UFO houses. What do you say? Built in the late 1970s on the northern coast of Taiwan, these bizarre pod-shaped things were meant to be a futuristic vacation resort. But what was supposed to be a sleek, modern getaway turned into an eerie, abandoned oddity. Bad luck hit pretty early. Financial issues, construction mishaps, and even local superstitions, some believed the land was cursed, plagued the project. The homes, painted in cheery shades of pink and yellow, stood unfinished, like alien spacecraft that landed and then just forgot what to do next. For years, these pods sat in eerie silence, looking like something straight out of a retro sci-fi movie. Some said they were haunted, others just called them weird. Either way, they didn't last. By 2010, the Sanji UFO houses were demolished, leaving behind only photos and plenty of conspiracy theories. Number 12, Deception Island, Antarctica. Even by Antarctic standards, Deception Island has had a very rough time. This icy outpost has been a whaling station, a research hub, and an active volcano's unwilling victim. The island, which is actually the flooded caldera of a volcano, started as a whaling base in the early 1900s. But in 1967 and 1969, nature decided to remind everyone who's boss. The volcano erupted, wiping out British and Chilean research stations in a matter of hours. Scientists evacuated, and what remained was a landscape of ruined buildings, rusting equipment, and one very ominous, empty airplane hangar. Today, Deception Island is mostly visited by adventurous tourists and occasional researchers. It's a place where steam rises from volcanic beaches, and you can take a hot bath next to glaciers, until, the volcano decides otherwise. If ghost towns could be judged on their level of pure drama, Deception Island would be top tier. Now let's talk about number 11, Oradour-sur-Glane, France. Some places are abandoned because of time, others because of tragedy. Oradour-sur-Glane is one of the latter, a place forever frozen in horror. On June 10, 1944, Nazi soldiers entered this quiet French village under the pretense of an identity check. Instead, they carried out one of the worst massacres of World War II. They rounded up 642 men, women, and children, executed them, and then burned the village to the ground. Only a handful survived. After the war, France made a rare decision. The village would never be rebuilt. It would remain as it was, a silent witness to the cruelty that took place. Walking through Oradour today feels like stepping into the past. Rusted bicycles lean against scorched walls, abandoned sewing machines sit where they were last used, and the town clock remains stuck at the moment the horror unfolded. There are ghost towns, and then there is Oradour, a place where history refuses to be erased. Number 10. Body, California. If ever there was a poster child for the phrase, easy come, easy go, it would be Bodie, California. Born during the gold rush of the late 1800s, Bodie was once a thriving town where miners, gamblers, and outlaws rubbed elbows in saloons and gambling halls. At its peak, it had hotels, churches, and more than 60 saloons, because what's a gold rush town without an abundance of bad decisions? But when the gold ran out, so did the people. By the early 1900s, Bodie was already on its way to being a ghost town. By the 1940s, it was officially abandoned. Today, Bodie remains in a state of arrested decay. Homes still have furniture inside, old shops display goods that haven't moved in decades, and everything feels as though the residents simply walked away one day and never looked back. If ghosts exist, they're probably still playing poker in one of Bodie's saloons. But could it be due to the lake that existed in California maybe 100 years ago? Well, who knows? But this place is pretty scary and eerie. Number 9. Salton Riviera, California. When the Salton Sea appeared in 1905, people called it a miracle. By the 1950s, it was California's hottest new vacation spot. Think beachfront resorts, yachts, and Hollywood celebrities sipping cocktails by the water. But what looked like a paradise was actually an environmental time bomb. The lake had no natural outlet, which meant every bit of agricultural runoff and salt buildup stayed put. Over time, the water turned toxic. Fish started dying by the millions, their rotting carcasses piling up on once pristine beaches. The air smelled like something had died, because, well, it had. The fancy resorts emptied, homes were abandoned, and the whole place became an apocalyptic wasteland. Now, the Salton Sea is shrinking, and the air quality is some of the worst in the country. The skeletons of old resorts and forgotten boats still line the shore, eerie reminders of a dream that turned into a slow-moving disaster. Number 8. Hashima Island, Japan. If ghosts needed an island getaway, it would be their top pick. Once a thriving coal mining settlement, this tiny 16-acre island was home to over 5,000 people until the coal ran out. When Japan switched to petroleum in the 1970s, the island was abandoned practically overnight, leaving behind a dense labyrinth of crumbling buildings. It's a strange place. Skyscrapers with no residents, staircases leading nowhere, and entire apartment blocks frozen in time. The ocean slowly eats away at the concrete, making the island look like a post-apocalyptic movie set. Some areas are so unstable that visitors aren't even allowed inside. In 2009, Hashima reopened to tourists, and in 2015, it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But even as people walk its empty streets, there's a feeling that something still lingers. Whether it's the past, the ghosts of forgotten workers, or just the island itself refusing to let go, Hashima remains one of the eeriest places on Earth. Number 7. Angkor, Cambodia. Some cities fade into obscurity. Angkor just got swallowed by the jungle. Once the capital of the Khmer Empire and home to nearly 1 million people, Angkor is now a hauntingly beautiful ruin where ancient stone meets creeping vines. At its heart stands Angkor Wat, one of the largest and most famous temples ever built. Originally constructed as a Hindu temple in the 12th century, it later transformed into a Buddhist sanctuary. But Angkor wasn't just about temples. It was a metropolis with sophisticated infrastructure, sprawling reservoirs, and roads bustling with life. Then, around the 15th century, the city's rulers moved on, leaving nature to reclaim what was once the beating heart of an empire. Despite its abandonment, Angkor has never truly been empty. The fact is that over 100,000 people still live near its ruins, their lives entwined with the past. Number 6. Tyneham, England. Tyneham isn't your typical abandoned village. It didn't fall to famine, war, or industry collapse. Instead, it was borrowed for war and never given back. In 1943, as World War II raged, the British government asked the 225 residents of Tyneham to leave their homes. They were given 1 month. The land was needed as a military training area ahead of the D-Day invasion, but villagers were reassured they could return after the war. That promise, like so many made in wartime, was quietly forgotten. Decades later, Tyneham remains frozen in time. Stone cottages stand roofless, nature pushing its way through broken windows and doorways. The old church, miraculously intact, still hosts occasional concerts and services, as if stubbornly refusing to accept its ghost town status. Visitors are allowed in on weekends, walking the same lanes where villagers once believed they would grow old. But in the end, war wrote a different story. Number 5. Pompeii, Italy. Some towns crumble over time. Pompeii was obliterated in one afternoon. In AD 79, Mount Vesuvius erupted with a force that left no escape. A cloud of ash rolled over the city, suffocating thousands and encasing them in volcanic debris. Their bodies decomposed, leaving behind haunting voids that archaeologists later filled with plaster, creating the ghostly death casts that made Pompeii famous. But it wasn't just people who were frozen in time. Graffiti still clings to the walls, some of it crude, some poetic. Elaborate frescoes, preserved in shockingly vibrant color, depict Roman life in vivid detail. There's even evidence of takeout counters and portable grills, because even in ancient times, people just wanted a quick meal. Pompeii was a city full of life, ambition, and everyday moments, all snatched away in an instant. Life is pretty short. Number 4. Two Guns, Arizona. If the Wild West had a fever dream, it would look like Two Guns, Arizona. Once just a few scattered homesteads, this bizarre roadside stop came to life in the 1920s, when entrepreneur and all-around wild character, Harry Miller decided to turn it into a tourist trap. Miller went all in on spectacle, setting up a mini-zoo, constructing fake Native American ruins, and even giving tours of a cave where Apache warriors had once died in battle, because nothing says vacation fun like profiting off historical tragedy. He even sold skulls, claiming they belonged to the fallen warriors. But karma came fast. After legal battles, fires, and a particularly bad decision that involved shooting his landlord, Miller skipped town. By the 1970s, Route 66 had been rerouted, and 2 guns was left to the elements. Number 3. Mandu, India. Mandu isn't just a ghost town, it's a love story carved in stone. Nestled in the hills of Madhya Pradesh, this ancient city dates back to at least the 6th century AD and boasts some of India's most breathtaking architecture. Forts, palaces, and tombs dot the landscape, each whispering tales of a bygone era. One of the most tragic legends of Mandu is that of Baz Bahadur, the last independent ruler, and Rupmati, a shepherdess with a voice so beautiful it could stop time. Enchanted by her singing, Bahadur made her his queen, but their love story was doomed. When a Mughal army invaded, Bahadur fled, and Rupmati, unwilling to be taken by the enemy, chose poison over captivity. Today, visitors can wander through Mandu's ruins, from the towering Mandu Fort to the ethereal Jahaz Mahal, built between 2 artificial lakes, giving it the illusion of floating. Some places hold on to history. Mandu lives in it. All right, now, let's move to Number 2. Humberstone, Chile. For a while, Humberstone was pure gold, except the rush here wasn't for gold at all. It was for saltpeter, the magical mineral that made Chile one of the wealthiest nations in South America. Back in the late 1800s, potassium nitrate, aka saltpeter, was in high demand as a key ingredient in fertilizers. Chile's Atacama Desert had an endless supply, and mining towns like Humberstone sprang up overnight. By the early 1900s, it was home to thousands of workers digging up and refining the stuff that kept global agriculture running. But the boom was short-lived. During World War I, Germany developed synthetic fertilizers, and suddenly, the world didn't need Chilean saltpeter anymore. Humberstone emptied out, but the desert refused to let it decay. The dry air has kept its buildings eerily intact. Empty schools, abandoned houses, and rusting machinery stand just as they did a century ago. It's a ghost town, but not quite dead. The wind still rattles through its streets, as if waiting for someone to return. Number 1. Krakow, Italy. Perched on a rocky cliff like the set of a medieval ghost story, Krakow has been standing, barely, for nearly 1,000 years. The problem? The ground underneath it had other plans. Settled in the 11th century, Krakow thrived for centuries, complete with castles, churches, and winding stone streets. It even survived plagues, invasions, and political chaos. But by the 20th century, nature fought back. Landslides and quakes cracked its foundations, making it too dangerous to live in. By 1963, the last residents packed up and moved to safer ground, leaving the town eerily intact but completely lifeless. Now, Krakow looks like time simply ran out. Empty doorways stare down at visitors, staircases lead nowhere, and the silence is deafening. Filmmakers and tourists love its haunting beauty, but Krakow itself, it stands as proof that sometimes even the strongest foundations can't hold forever. If you have enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like and subscribe button for more content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.